What's up, friends, and welcome into Fantasy Pros. It is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It's Week 8 ranks. We've got it all. And of course, I'm Chris Welsh, joined by the guys that are going to give all the ranks to you. It's Pat Fitzmaurice and Mick Ciallela. We're going to be doing the ranks to get you guys set because there's chaos across the board. Of course, there are massive injuries with some pretty big effects across the board. We've got timeshares that are changing up. We've got trades. We've got a little bit of all of it, and we're excited to get into it with a little sprinkle as well to give a shout out to the Week 7 ranks and our accuracy contest. We'll do that here in a second. But Pat, we got to say hi. What's up, Pat?
Hey, Welsh, doing well now that I'm no longer spending 4 hours putting in waiver claims, licking my wounds. So, that is becoming quite a chore these days with the injuries piling up.
Waivers is annoying, by the way, especially with Fab. I just want to point out, Pat and I are in this big league. It's a pentathlon. It's all these different events, and Juwan Jennings was available. And just as a little story, we put in, it's a dual team, Bogman and I, we put in $31 on Juwan Jennings. Guess how much he went for in that league, Pat, that we're in?
Oh, no. Did he go for more than 31?
No, he went for $31, but not to us. So we got same money.
No.
I mean, you put in the perfect bid and you're at the dollar and you get beat. It's a cruel game. It's a cruel game, but no suggested Fab bids here, just suggested ranks for you all. Mick, what's up, buddy?
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
We're good. You are on the wrong schedule of shows, by the way. I would just like to point this out because last week you were top 20 in the ECR ranks here at Fantasy Pros. This week, shout out to our boy, we're going to do the top 3, but Scott Pianowski was 19th, and Scott was on last week. So you two need to coordinate together to try to get on when you're coming off of like the best week possible. But Mick, I do believe you're top 25 in the overall so far across all 7 weeks.
Top 25 so far. Hopefully I can hold steady over the second half of the season. But so far it's been a good run.
We got some good dudes here. We got some good guidance. It's not me, but it's Pat, it's Mick, it's Scott. We got you guys covered. So thank you guys for hanging out with us. Today, we are talking running backs. We are going to be going through your top 36. We'll do them in our 3 broken tiers, of course. So we will get you guys set with that here in just a little bit. Shout out on the rank accuracy contest, finishing number 1 for week 7, just like everybody chalked it up. Montradamus. I didn't think I'd say that today. Montradamus from Beast Dome was number 1 in the accuracy rank. So congratulations. Number 2, Wyatt Pertoloni and Aaron St. Dennis. That is not an easy group of pronunciation, I suppose, for me. But those were the top 3 in accuracy from week 7. You can see the entire list. Most importantly, I finished above Joe Pisapia, and that's all that really counts. But you can check out the entire list if you want the top 10. Shout out to all of our rankers. And as I mentioned, Scott Pianowski finishing inside the top 20 coming off of last week. We had a really great show. You guys want to check out all the ranks for all the positions, go to fantasypros.com/rankings. Follow that throughout the week. Things are going to keep adjusting, but that can keep you in the know. Plus also the tools. My playbook can kind of keep you steered in the right direction for lineup suggestions, players to pick up. Make sure you download it today on my playbook. Forced to go rogue, hunted from within. This is Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Developed by Treyarch and Raven, Black Ops 6 is a mind-bending narrative and unbound by the rules of engagement. This is signature Black Ops. Dynamic moment-to-moment gameplay, including a variety of play spaces with blockbuster set pieces, action-packed moments, high-stakes heists, and cloak and dagger spy activity. Best-in-class multiplayer experience will test your skills across 16 new maps at launch, including 12 core 6v6 maps and 4 strike maps that can be played 2v2 or 6v6, marking the epic return of round-based zombies. The fan-favorite mode where players will take down hordes of the undead in 2 brand new maps at launch. You can look forward to even more exciting maps and groundbreaking experiences in both multiplayer and zombies. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is a spy action thriller set in the 90s by the end of the Cold War and the rise of the United States as a single superpower. Head over to callofduty.com/Black Ops 6 and pre-order Call of Duty Black Ops 6. Available on October 25th.
Rated M for mature.
Gentlemen, are you ready to jump into these running back ranks? Let's start with the top 12. Let's look at the big board. Saquon Barkley comes in as our number one this week. I think he was as well last week going up against Cincinnati. Breece Hall, Derrick Henry, Ken Walker, Joe Mixon rounds out our top 5. Kyron Williams, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jordan Mason, Kareem Hunt, DeVon Achane, and Aaron Jones. There's our top 12 as we know. So we usually aren't going to talk a ton about the top 12. These are no-brain starters, of course, but there is one player I want to talk about because there is some dissenting opinion amongst you guys because you guys are not as big as the ECR crew that's out there. DeVon Achane, he comes in at 11 on this list after a pretty decent performance, and Tua's back. I think that's kind of the big key here. Tua's back. It makes people feel more comfortable that this offense is going to hum, and he played well with a bad quarterback, but against like the worst run defense in the league in the Colts. But both of you guys are not really feeling DeVon Achane from a no doubt, no brainer standpoint. You guys both have him at 14 and 15. Mick, you've got him at 14. Pat, you've got him at 15. So this is outside of an RB1. So Pat, let's start with you real quick. DeVon Achane, what's the worry maybe versus consensus? And as the top 12 are no brainers and you don't even think about it, you set it and forget it. Is even 14 still a set it and forget it with Achane?
I think it probably is in most leagues, except the real small leagues, the 8-team, the 10-team, where maybe if you're just totally stacked at running back. I guess I'm considering this a prove-it game, and I do hate being below consensus on a player I love. But yes, we expect the Dolphins' offense to be functional again with Tua back at quarterback. That's great. And Achane has pretty much established himself as the lead running back with Miami. Raheem Mostert taking on more of a complimentary role this season. I'm starting Achane in a bunch of leagues this week, and I feel good about it. But am I confident that he is going to smash? Not entirely. And the Arizona run defense was actually pretty respectable on Monday night, holding J.K. Dobbins to 40 yards rushing on 14 carries. So maybe the Cardinals aren't the pushover against the run that we thought they were. So, yeah, I'm enthusiastic about Achane, but maybe just not over the moon this week.
Mick, Erickson and I have been the leaders of the kind of buy the Dolphins, early values over the last month. Some of it pays off, some of it doesn't. I do think, 3 weeks ago, if you had bought Achane or Tyreek Hill, that cost might end up working out Achane a little bit more. Do you think Achane is going to bounce back to the guy that some viewed as maybe being the top overall player, maybe the highest upside of running backs in the top 12? Do you believe Tua coming back can get him back into that spot? I know you kind of seem a little cautious maybe with the ranks lower than ECR by a couple spots, but do you think the upside still exists with Achane in that backfield?
I think there is upside. I think I was a little bit lower than some of the rankers coming into the season on Achane. Again, I think he could be an RB1. I don't think he can be the RB1. I think there are too many mouths to feed in that offense. And I think that kind of speaks to why I have him ranked a little bit lower this week. I think the Dolphins with Tua back, I think the efficiency there for Achane is going to be there. But I worry about the volume. And I think specifically they need to get the pass game in order. I mean, we saw Mike McDaniels kind of talking to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle last week and kind of saying, hey guys, this is the downturn. Things will pick up when Tua comes back. And I think we're going to need to see that out of the Dolphins. They're going to have to start winning some games, and they're going to have to start doing it with their passing offense. So I think Achane's efficiency should be fine, but I don't think we're going to see, we saw him get 22 carries against Buffalo, even 15 last week. I think we might see more in the 10 to 12 range with Mostert there and some of the passing weapons. So I think Achane's efficiency will be fine, but I think his overall volume will be a little bit lower.
This is a little aside thing, but Mick, do you think these are the last 2 weeks we're going to see Jordan Mason ranked as a top 12 running back, maybe even top 24? Like that. Obviously, this would be kind of a better question for next week, but these seem like the last 2 weeks because we're going to have a bye week and Christian McCaffrey coming back. But what say you on Mason real quick?
Yeah, I think this will probably be the last week with the 49ers having a bye in week 9. So I think this is probably, if you have a chance to sell high, I think this is probably your best opportunity to do it with Mason. Yeah,
Pat, they're talking about week 10. So this actually could be the last one. So what if you had to do an early prediction, by the way, for week 10, just looking at Mason here at 9? I mean, we're looking at a top 9 quarterback or running back that's going to be vaulted down to what? What do you think, Pat? Like Jordan Mason 34? outside the top 36 when McCaffrey comes back?
That's probably a pretty good guess, Welsh, because we don't expect Christian McCaffrey to walk right back into 25 touches in his first game back. So Mason probably still plays a supporting role there. But yeah, it's probably going to be RB3 range and only going down from there, unfortunately. Too bad, because I know he's been a set it and forget it starting running back for everyone all season.
Yeah, unless he's in the top 5. Hey, he's inside the 5-yard line. Here's one more real quick. Whom of these two running backs do you think can stay on this top 12 rank the rest of the season? Kareem Hunt or Aaron Jones? Let's go to you, Pat. Who stays on this list rest of season?
Kareem Hunt. The Chiefs'
really?
MO has changed. Yes, the Chiefs have one of the best defenses in the NFL now, and the Chiefs' defense is actually better than the Chiefs' offense. And who would have thought we would ever say that? They want to run the ball and play defense. The Chiefs have become strangely old school in their approach to winning games, and it's working. So why would they go away from that? Like, Kareem Hunt's volume has been fantastic.
Yeah, really.
I don't see why that changes.
I was going to say, really, the only thing that would change is if like Pacheco did come back, or we've feared what the CEH thing would be. Mick, what do you say? Kareem Hunt, Aaron Jones, who can stay on this top 12 list?
I think I'm going to go with Jones on that one. He's averaging 3.42 yards per carry after contact, which I think is more sustainable than what Hunt is offering. And again, we haven't seen the Chiefs score that many points. You mentioned the old school style. They're not scoring 30, 40 points every week like we've seen in years past. So I think Minnesota's offense has a little more versatility, a little more upside. So I think I'm going to go with Jones there.
Ooh, I could be the tiebreaker. Not gonna really. I would only caveat it because it's like, if Hunt has the job the rest of the year, I think it's him. The volume's insane, but I'm not sure he does. And I'm not sure that actually sticks. And I don't think they want to unload a workload on Aaron Jones. He's been very efficient in the amount of touches. So, I'm cheating. I'm saying both sides of it. Like, if, could be Kareem Hunt, could be Aaron Jones, but that's kind of the fun of it. I think maybe the key there is there might be sustainability on both sides rest of season, as guys that, 2 weeks ago, Aaron Jones may be seen as a top 15 guy. Kareem Hunt really not. And both of those players are kind of vaulting themselves in and locking in that top 12 to 15 RB. Speaking of even RB 15, let's go look at the RB 2s. We're going RB 13 through 24. We've got Josh Jacobs here at 13, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, James Cook, James Conner. That's your top 5 in the RB 2 territory. Chuba Hubbard, Alvin Kamara, Javonte Williams, Brian Robinson Jr., Tony Pollard, David Montgomery, and Najee Harris. Let's go and take a look at DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift was actually 11 on this list. He was an RB1 just a day ago. These ranks can really just have some just weird variations over a 24-hour period, especially as we do this show. That's like the prime rank time. He was 14 on this list. Mick, you've got him at 13, but Pat at 17. So a little bit of a hater on DeAndre Swift. Or is it just semantics about ranks, Pat?
Well, it's been quite the swing for DeAndre Swift, who after the first 3 weeks of the season was RB 42 in half-point PPR scoring. Of course, in the stretch from week 4 to week 6 before the Bears' week 7 bye, over that 3-week period, DeAndre Swift was RB2 behind only Derrick Henry. So quite the turnaround. I know an RB 17 ranking seems somewhat disrespectful given the rebound for Swift. But I don't know, maybe not in a week where there are no teams on bye. I do have him ranked ahead of Alvin Kamara and Chuba Hubbard, so maybe that counts for something. But I guess my two biggest hang-ups, Welsh, with Swift are that, one, I still don't entirely trust the Chicago Bears offensive line, which was really terrible in those first 3 weeks. And number two, during this outstanding 3-game run for Swift, the Bears won all 3 of those games, and 2 of them were blowouts. One over the Panthers, one against the Jaguars. And let's face it, the Panthers pretty much make every running back they go against look like Walter Payton. So not that the Commanders are in a especially tough matchup, especially without Jonathan Allen on their defensive line, their best defensive lineman injured. But I'm just not ready to move DeAndre Swift into RB1 territory when pretty much every time throughout his career we were ready to do that and make DeAndre Swift an RB1, he wound up letting us down. So there's still a little bit of trepidation with this particular player.
Yeah, interesting. A tool that we have on the Fantasy Pros, or tool, it's a couple cool things that we put on just the rankings page, not even into my playbook. They'll have overall grades. He is the top of the B grade. So Josh Jacob is actually an A- graded player as far as matchup and performance goes. DeAndre Swift leads the Bs in a B+, but we also do the matchup ratings. So as far as anywhere from 1 to 5 stars on that matchup, there's 2 5 stars, but 3 4 stars, and DeAndre Swift is in that 4-star as far as what is considered a matchup against Washington. So Mick, you're actually 1 spot higher than consensus. That wasn't the case like a day ago. Anything you want to add on the DeAndre Swift start this week against the Commanders?
Yeah, I think, Pat mentioned the Jonathan Allen injury, and just in general, Washington is allowing, I believe it's 5.1 yards per carry to opposing running backs. So I don't think the matchup is overly daunting. And I think, listen, with Washington probably missing Jaden Daniels, I don't think we have to worry as much about Chicago playing from behind or playing in catch-up mode. So I think the volume will be there for Swift. So I think I'd be comfortable starting him this week.
Well, let's go to the player that just signed a contract extension, 2 more years for Alvin Kamara. But this is kind of an inverse situation where I just told you that, there's technically 5 players with like 4 or better matchup ratings. Well, when you go into the 2-star ratings, there are 3 players. Alvin Kamara is that up against the Chargers this week. His rank comes in at 19. Pat, you've got him at 18, but Mick, you've got him at 12. So you've got him as an RB1. Offense is a little squirrely. Rattler, there are some positive signs. There's lots of negative signs. I thought this was going to be a 9 to 10 catch game for Kamara last outing. Just throw him the ball all day, every day. Maybe they'll turn to that. What's got Alvin Kamara in this kind of new version of the Saints offense, a new version that not everybody wanted? No Shaheed, Rattler at quarterback. What makes him the RB1 for you this week?
Well, listen, I might be an Alvin Kamara apologist. I might be a little bit too high, but I do think, like you mentioned, there should be just a ton of volume, especially in the receiving game. Denver allows the 7th most receptions to opposing running backs. And as you mentioned, the Saints have very few weapons. So I guess we'll see if Rattler's going to start or if Derek Carr can come back. And same thing with Chris Olave, if he can come back in the fold. So this ranking is a little bit high. It might be lower in the next couple of days. But I think if Olave is out, you got to give Kamara 7-8 catches, and kind of by default, he should be a top 15 running back, I think.
So, Pat, it's just, kind of brought back the other side of it. I kind of laid out there's some negatives in there and like what Rattler might be doing with this offense. Teams really saying, hey, why doesn't Rattler beat us with his arm? They're going to not let Kamara beat them as much. This is a much tougher matchup. What say you on Kamara?
Well, Mick lays out a plausible scenario where maybe Alvin Kamara does have 8 to 10 catches, and that makes his day in PPR and really helps him in half-point PPR. But we have just seen the air completely let out of the tires of this offense without Derek Carr, who by no means is a great quarterback, but the gap between Carr and Spencer Rattler is still pretty cavernous. We've seen that in the 2 games with Rattler at quarterback. Kamara's averaged 2.5 yards per carry and 3.5 yards per target. So he's just not able to operate in this dysfunctional offense. And the matchup this week against the Chargers, not exactly a favorable one. So
when you rank him at 18, Pat, you are saying that it's open for interpretation, that this is not a set it and forget it. Just always trying to find the line for people, because I think people assume like, oh, it's like top 12. You don't even, why you even talk about it, blah, blah, blah. But it's like when you get into the RB2s, like where does that line start? And I guess obviously we could just look at your ranks and it's like, oh, well, if you have, DeAndre Swift and Kareem Hunt, that would be higher. But what's the line for you?
Yeah, that's kind of it. So if there's a team in a 10-team league where they've got a set it and forget it RB1, a Joe Mixon or something like that, and then the RB2 is a choice between DeAndre Swift and Alvin Kamara, yeah, I'd start Swift. I mean, Kamara, the volume, we know he's going to get volume, but man, the efficiency has just nosedived without Derek Carr.
Yeah, and I think the big thing is just talking about sometimes there can be 17 players that are just like, no, you have to get these guys in your lineup. Maybe Kamara's moving out of that a little bit is where we're going with it. That then takes us to the other side of this same game, talking about J.K. Dobbins. So Dobbins, was and is an ECR 15 on this list. We've got Mick at 16, which is about ECR, but Pat, you are higher. So you guys are battling this out this weekend of Kamara versus J.K. Dobbins, where Mick has got Kamara as RB1. Pat, you have Dobbins as RB1. So let's hear it. J.K. Dobbins versus this Saints defense, which, by the way, 5-star rating. I believe this is one of the 2 5-star ratings in this RB range as far as running backs go.
Yeah, so the Saints have given up 502 rushing yards in their last 2 games. 502. Javonte Williams had been struggling for much of the season. The Saints were a get-well card for Javonte Williams. Scored 24.6 fantasy points in Week 7 against the Saints and was RB6 on the week. Bucky, Irving, and Sean Tucker wrecked the Saints when they played them the week prior. They combined for 200 rushing yards and 3, I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 touchdowns, multiple touchdowns. Don't fade J.K. Dobbins just because he had the off game against the Cardinals on Monday night. I mean, this is such a perfect matchup for him, and we know how much the Chargers like to run the ball.
And volume. He's been given the volume, which is like, that's the thing that makes it feel so good too about J.K. Dobbins right now. You're not like out or anything, Mick, on J.K. Dobbins, but what's your take on him? You got him one spot lower than ECR. You guys are different. You're a mid RB2 where Pat is a low end RB1 for J.K. Dobbins.
I mean, one of the benefits of doing this show is having these fine conversations with you guys, because now that I'm looking at Kamara over Dobbins, I'm thinking that doesn't probably jive with what's more likely. So perhaps I should revisit that. But yeah, I think Dobbins is going to be fine this week. As Pat mentioned, the Saints have been a sieve. They've allowed like over 6 yards per carry over the last 4 weeks. A ton of volume. You mentioned, Gus Edwards is out for the Chargers, so Dobbins is getting all the volume. So I have no reservations about starting Dobbins this week whatsoever.
RB3s are coming up, the flexes, if you will. But first, the roller coaster of the NFL season. It's moving right along, my friends, and it promises to be a month full of tricks, treats, and, of course, touchdowns. And DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Running it in from the 1 or an 80-yard bomb, we don't care how they score those touchdowns. We want to bet them. And DraftKings heard us, and they are delivering. You can go and make your touchdown pick over at DraftKings Sportsbook on the app right now. And guess what? How often do you see who we talked about, Alvin Kamara, as a plus money play? Well, this week, in the battle of those J.K. Dobbins versus Alvin Kamara, J.K. Dobbins is a minus money touchdown option. Alvin Kamara, plus 135 as we do this episode. So you can get plus money on Kamara, maybe even same game parlay those two together. That would be the FantasyPros Ranks Special. You can put those two, the Pat and the Mick Special. Go and do it today, because you can score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. All you got to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use promo code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. RBs 25 through 36, my friends. We kick it off with Tank Bigsby, who moved down actually a little bit, who was in the RB2 territory going up against Green Bay. 26, Chase Brown, followed by Rhamondre, Rico Dowdle, Bucky Irving, Rachaad White, Alexander Mattison at 31, Raheem Mostert, Tyrone Tracy, Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, and Tyler Algier. Quite a group. So let's talk about Tank Bigsby here. This is another one of those situations where you guys have a 5-spot personal rank difference. Bigsby was up at 18, by the way, like a day ago. He's moved down to 25 when more ranks have popped up. Pat, you are still lower than consensus. Mick, you are a bit higher. You have him as an RB2. So Mick, let's start with you. RB21 currently for Tank Bigsby. We saw him go off, but we know ETN is always looming out there. What's your take on Tank Bigsby starting this week?
I think it depends on your other options. As we mentioned before, you might have an RB1 that's kind of a set it and forget it guy, and then have 2 or 3 options that you can deploy in that RB2 or flex spot. I think Bigsby is kind of in that mix. He got 26 carries last week, which is probably unrealistic given, as you mentioned, ETN looming, and the matchup is not going to be as favorable as playing the Patriots. But I think Bigsby has shown enough efficiency to warrant starting him in most situations. So I think he's in that low-end RB2 range this week.
Pat, same thing on Tank Bigsby. There's so much excitement, but there's also been a little bit of like, maybe it's time to get out from because you're getting the big volume and we really don't. It's also a bad offense. Like let's also point that out. Like they've got to be in a position where they can even run the ball because Tank does not do third downs. He's not a pass blocking type of guy. So he's taken out of that. So if this team is blown out, Bigsby's upside also kind of fades away a little bit. So let's get your take on Tank Bigsby and putting him in your lineup this week.
Yeah, you nailed it, Welsh. He is a really hard player to assess for the reason you outlined, just his lack of involvement in the passing game. Bigsby has 1 reception on the entire season. So yes, he's absolutely smashed in 2 of his last 3 games. He had 101 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns against the Colts in week 5, 118 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Patriots last week. But in between those 2 games, 7 carries for 24 yards in a 35-16 loss to the Bears. And I think we have to account for Bigsby's floor with our ranking of him. I mean, he's shown this high ceiling, but he's a good player on a bad team. And if this bad team falls behind in a game, all bets are off with Bigsby's rushing volume. And that could certainly happen against the Packers, who one of the best passing games in the league going up against an absolute Swiss cheese pass defense for the Jaguars. So if the Jags fall behind by multiple scores, and they are, I think, 5.5 point underdogs, even at home against the Packers this week, that really could be a trapdoor for Tank Bigsby and what he offers you for fantasy scoring this week.
I don't have your rank in front of me, but who do you feel more comfortable with this week? Tank Bigsby or Rhamondre Stevenson, Pat?
I've got Rhamondre ranked higher. Man. I know it didn't go well for him last week, but I still think the Patriots want to lean on him pretty heavily, and I think he's a little more resilient because he is used as a pass catcher.
It's just tough when like Hasty got a bunch of catches. He made his due last week in the receiving game. Antonio Gibson also does that. Like, I guess I'm a little bit down on Rhamondre Stevenson right now because when you took away the bell cow-ness of him and you start having more of a rotation, I feel like that kind of limits his upside. Mick, same thing. Bigsby or Stevenson? Who do you feel better about this week?
I'm going to go Bigsby. As you mentioned, Stevenson had 7 carries last week, I believe. So even though the Jets' run defense has not been very good, I don't think the game script is going to be there to allow them to run a ton. And you mentioned Hasty and Gibson being in the mix. So I just don't know if Stevenson's going to get enough touches to warrant starting him over Bigsby.
It's a lot of these guys. This range is a lot of like major questions that you don't really have in the RB2 territory. Probably not like a big surprise. Like, yeah, duh, these are RB 25 through 36s. But yeah, I mean, you look across the board and I'm just like, don't feel great. Like, I don't really see a whole lot of guys that I feel great about. Now, maybe that's a loose way to even talk about any RB about feeling great. But one guy that has completely changed as far as what their volume in has taken over, and we do want to talk about workhorses, is Alexander Mattison. He had all the primary carries. Zamir White seems to be phased out of this offense. Mattison is the guy. We're starting to see yards that we're going with just like, these weird, have 1 catch for a touchdown. It would save his week. But feeling good about a Raiders running back, that doesn't really vibe. That doesn't jive at all. But Alexander Mattison, ECR 31 this week, actually. He's kind of moved around a little bit. You guys are both lower than the consensus. Specifically, you, Mick, you've got him at 37. So he is outside of your top 36 RBs. What do you got on Mattison? I'm not sure it's really debatable that he's the workhorse guy, but I will say I believe he has the lowest matchup rating of all 36 running backs we're talking about. It's a 1-star versus Kansas City.
And that's exactly what it comes down to for me. The Chiefs are allowing the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. So the volume is nice, but I don't see him scoring a touchdown. I think this is a game where, I mentioned earlier the Chiefs are not scoring 30 or 40 points per game, but I still do not think this game is going to be in very much doubt. So I don't think that Mattison is going to get 25 or 30 touches. It might be closer to 15 or 20. And without scoring a touchdown, I just really don't have much interest in starting him this week.
It is kind of touchdown dependent a bit, except for the volume that he got last week. Pat, same thing on Mattison. You've got Mattison at 32, so you do have him as, RB3, I say flex or whatever. What's your take on Mattison for this week?
fundamentally not that much different than Mick's take, even though we're 5 spots apart in the rankings here. Yes, it does look like Mattison is the lead back for the Raiders now. We saw him get 26 touches last week versus only 4 for Zamir White, but that might not mean a lot against this Chiefs run defense, which is just impregnable. And yeah, so like I'm flexing Mattison in a league. I don't feel especially good about it. We could just see a lot of empty volume, the kind we've seen from Alvin Kamara the last 2 weeks, quite frankly.
Who would you rather flex this week? Alexander Mattison or Nick Chubb, Pat?
Oh man. That's a really good question.
I love the frustration. I love when you ask a question and everyone's like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I have to go with Mattison just because I'm more certain about the volume.
There is volume, 100%. Well, but you also do know what you're getting in Nick Chubb. You know you're getting 11 carries or 12 carries. Like it's right in there. Mick, same thing. Mattison or Chubb, who would you rather flex this week?
I have Chubb a little bit higher. I mean, I think we've seen the Ravens defense is not the Ravens defense of old. So I think based on the matchup, I'm going to go Chubb a little bit higher than Mattison.
You guys are opposite on everything this week. What's happened? Like literally, you guys haven't agreed on one thing. I love it. That's the best. One more. Well, we're going to do a heat check, price check on an RB. One more in this range to do a focal point on, though. Tyrone Tracy, ECR 33. Pat, you've got him right on ECR. Mick, you got him a little bit lower. This has been one of those, like he's taking over for Devin Singletary. Pat, did you see enough in how they're using him and showing us the split that Tyrone Tracy is going to be worthwhile starting moving forward? I mean, and I guess I'm kind of answering that because I know you have him in the 36. So you're saying what he does is good enough to keep going, whatever volume it is. He is going against Pittsburgh, though. So your take on Tracy taking over that backfield?
Yeah, I think he showed enough in those 2 terrific performances against the Seahawks and the Bengals, where I do think he has passed Devin Singletary in the pecking order and is either going to be the lead back or the 1A to Singletary's 1B. And it's possible that the Giants were sort of giving Devin Singletary a ramp-up game off the groin injury last week. So in his first game back, Tracy had, let's see, I don't have it here, but the snaps were clearly in Tracy's favor. It was like 39-12, but neither guy was able to get anything going. And I do worry that the loss of Andrew Thomas, the Giants' star left tackle, and by far the best offensive lineman they have, like that just crushed them against the Eagles. They could not do anything. They couldn't protect Daniel Jones, which led to a lot of 3-and-outs, which of course means a reduction in touch volume for the running backs. So I'm worried about that in the matchup against the Steelers. That's not one you want to have with your star left tackle missing.
Mick, it's the same thing with Tyrone Tracy, but who would you rather start this week? Tyrone Tracy or Raheem Mostert?
I'm going to go with Mostert. I think with Tracy, my issue is I'm not 100% sure he's taken over yet. Yes, we saw the snap disparity between he and Singletary last week. But I think that may have been more of a function of them easing Singletary back in. So I'm willing to take the chance of sitting Tracy for a week in a bad matchup against Pittsburgh. And if he, outsnaps him 3-1 again, then I'll have Tracy ranked higher next week. But for this week, I don't see any reason to force it.
Finishing it off here with a price check on some Buccaneer running backs. During the buy-sell trade show, I put Rachaad White as the sell running back. Kind of an obvious thing. Like it's also pinpointing, the players you want to get out from under or, trade into immediately right now with this huge upside the rest of the season. It's kind of hard to pinpoint. Rachaad White, though, felt like a no-brainer after scoring 2 touchdowns where his volume is in question. There are 3 running backs in play. The snap showed it. It was still more primarily Bucky and Rachaad, but Sean Tucker took enough that it could have made those guys even a little bit more valuable. So the current price check here, Bucky Irving, you guys both have higher, and is the ECR guy higher at 28. Rachaad White is not inside the top 36. Mick, you have Bucky Irving at 25. Pat, you have him at 30. Mick, you've got Rachaad White at 36, but Pat, you also have Rachaad White at 31. So Mick, let's go to you here. You see a much higher definitive difference between Bucky Irving and Rachaad White, even though Rachaad White is coming off of that big touchdown game. Just want to get your take on Bucky Irving versus Rachaad White for this week.
I think Bucky Irving is definitely the Buccaneers running back you want to start. I mean, White had a good game, but there was so much going on in that game. And granted, the Bucs have lost Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, so perhaps White gets some of that receiving volume that boosted him to close to RB1 status a year ago. But I just don't know how sustainable that is. I think Irving has proven that he is the best running back on that team, and I think he's going to get most of the work going forward, along with Sean Tucker, as you mentioned.
It's an important thing, Pat, is that there are no more wide receivers. They don't exist in Tampa Bay anymore. They're just, the next guys. It's not Godwin. It's not Evans. Maybe that's a positive for Rachaad White. I still tend to think it's not, and that I kind of want to get out if I can. You have these guys next to each other. And I know sometimes that's a dictation of like hands up and being like, it could be either one of them. They're frustrating. So you don't seem to have as a definitive, like, I want Bucky in there and not Rachaad White. But that's me speaking for you. What's your take?
This is not entirely a hands up situation, because I think if anyone has watched the Buccaneers play this year, you would have to conclude that Bucky Irving is better than Rachaad White. He has just looked like the better back, no question. And I think Mick hit on all the right points here about the Buccaneers and their offense, including the possibility that Rachaad White does play an enhanced role in their passing game now, because it is an all hands on deck situation for the Buccaneers passing game. And they're going to need that pass catching ability of Rachaad White, which Bucky Irving might be the dramatically better runner of the two, but Rachaad White is still a really, really good pass catching running back. So I think he's going to have a role, and maybe the injuries to Chris Godwin and Mike Evans mean a spike in value for both of these guys going forward. Like I think either one is flex worthy, possibly even RB2 worthy in larger leagues. So yeah, I mean, like you hate to say it, but those injuries probably increase the value of both of these guys.
And I like how you said that, because one thing to point out, Bucky Irving is not Tank Bigsby. They do play him on third downs. They do like to throw the ball. Another thing that they do, which I wish more teams would do, they put both of those backs in the same backfield a lot. They'll run motions where Bucky comes out, comes back in. They get tricky. Putting two talented running backs on the field at the same time, I think keeps defenses in, or trying to keep them in check. I wish more teams would actually do that. So the value in question does kind of put them both as flex options. The start and sit for the Bucs, it's difficult. Start sits in general for RBs, it's difficult, but that's why we got you covered. Don't forget about our weekly start and sit live stream on our YouTube channel, where you can come and ask any of your specific start and sit questions, rank questions, whatever you got. We'll be with you every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And for those listening on the podcast, go to youtube.com/FantasyPros, subscribe, click the bell to be notified when we are live with all of those live streams to get you hooked up.